Alright, here we go, guys. This is Siddharth from Mumbai. I am here to take a session on how to sketch and think like a designer. Right? So, before we get going with the session, I think you should know a little bit more about me. So, I'm currently in class 12th. I'm 16 years old and I'm preparing for engineering as well as design. So, it's IIT JEE plus all these various design schools around India. Right? In addition to all of this, I also run my own YouTube channel where I post time lapses of the sketches that I make, of the illustrations of various cars that I make. I've even painted a shoe, yes, I know, but that's because I love art in general. So I'm very passionate about cars. I have been drawing them ever since I was maybe around 3 or 4 years old. So I've gone through quite a lot of paper, believe me or not. Right, and so yeah, I think that's enough about me. I think we should get started about drawing. So let's go ahead, and my hands are dirty. So by the end of this session, I do not guarantee that you'll be able to draw like some professional, right? Because I am not a professional, so I can't guarantee you that you're going to be able to draw like a professional. However, I can guarantee that you'll be able to draw like this, right? So let's get started with the session and let's discuss materials first. So right here I have a few printing papers, right? Any sort of paper, cheap printing paper, JK copier, all that stuff. You can even use old used one-sided papers, you can use lined notebook papers, anything, because in this session it's not going to be about creating a masterpiece, it's going to be about learning, experience and practice, right? So there'll be a lot of scribbling, there'll be some cutting, don't worry. No one is perfect, alright? So you can all chillax. See, look over here, I've got a paper on which I've made I've made a list, I've written something, and look at the back of it. Sketches, right? So that's my point. It's all going to be rough today. So don't sit with paper you're going to be framing, right? So in case you don't have that paper, make some arrangement. Even newspaper will work, but you won't be able to see much in that, to be honest. We're also going to be discussing about the tools that we're going to need when drawing. So you can use normal pencils, right? You can even use pen pencils. There's nothing wrong in using pen pencils. I've seen a lot of artists really go and dislike pen pencils. There's nothing like that. Pen pencils work just as well as pencils do. You can do anything for practice. You can even use pen depending on your level of expertise when it comes to sketching. So if you're confident that you can make everything go in a few strokes, then pens are brilliant. Then when it comes to rendering, so if you're making an illustration of an automobile, you can use pencils, as obvious. These are my favorite mediums. You can use colored pens for a sort of scribbly sort of look. You can use sketch pens to fill in. I do not have Copic markers, but those are apparently the best when you have to make smooth textures. And you can even use paints if you're comfortable. So basically any medium you're comfortable with. Even crayons work well enough, right? So I do not want you to constrain yourself to what I am doing. Okay, so before we get started with the session, let's just discuss the 3 important aspects to designing. So first of all will be the sketch, or the sketching more accurately. Then after that will be proportions, and last of all will be creativity. This is if you're designing a car. Now if you also want to render a car, then what you need is accuracy and the ability to manage coloring tools, right? So we're mainly going to be discussing about these 3, but we will come to these 2 at the end of the session. So when it comes to sketching, a designer should have a free hand, right? You cannot hold the pencil too hard, or the pencil or the pen or whatever you're using too hard, right? Because that will really constrain the lines that you make. When you have a free hand, look, my fingers are quite a distance from the front, right? So I have a free hand in doing this. Whereas if you were to hold this, not only are you constraining yourself a little bit, you're applying more effort, but you're also you're also putting way too much pressure and you're wasting this nib, right? You want to keep it sharp, you don't want to blunt it out with the pressure, right? You want to keep it neat and clean. And you also want to be able to make everything in single strokes, right? So one of the biggest things that I have been practicing as a child is things like these. So making straight lines or making these sort of, rings and circles. Most of us look at this as unnecessary practice, but the truth is that you need all of this if you want your sketch to be smooth, right? So hold your pencil any way that is comfortable for you and just go ahead and make. All of this counts as practice. None of this is going to waste, except for the paper, of course. None of this is going to waste, right? So just keep on going ahead. A few spirals, maybe an S shape or something. This is all going to help you. A few curves, maybe some ellipses, an ellipse within an ellipse, a big ellipse, and circles. And while you're practicing this, make sure it's all fast, right? So things you have to keep in mind while sketching is that it should be fast and it should be light, right? Just make it light. Should be light on the paper, right? So when you're sketching, you don't want impressions on the back of the paper, right? You can not see any impressions, right? So if I were to really hold it dark, then we don't want these at the back of the paper, right? So it should be light. Make sure your grip is comfortable. You could hold it here, you could hold it here, right? This is personally more comfortable for me. And you go ahead and practice. Just keep on practicing, right? There is no way around it. If you want to make sure that your hand is smooth when you're sketching, these are some of the things you're gonna have to do, right? So I'm not saying you go around doing this like some madman. What I am saying though is that you practice a little bit. So maybe 5 minutes every day, fill up one paper with pencil, right? So you want to learn making straight lines. These are very important because if you're making the car and after you make the wheels, you're going to need a base line, you're going to need a shoulder line, you're going to need a roof line, you're going to need some guidelines, right? You're going to need all of these things. So straight lines, sketching straight lines is quite important. Even sketching ellipses is one of the most important things that we're going to learn in today's class. So make straight lines. Within these, let's say I'm going to make some curves, some spirals, and some ellipses, right? Then make some circles, and switch back to straight lines. So we're not using a scale over here at all, nor are we measuring this distance, and then just dropping a line. No, we've already imagined it. So if this is your edge of the paper, make your mind your scale. Straight lines, and just go fast, right? Don't worry if your line goes like this, does not matter. Your next line will probably go like this, right? So slowly we'll see a big improvement in the way your lines go, right? That's very important. You can even imagine it as sketching the borders for a sketch for any masterpiece if you're making one. So borders are quite important. Let's say you're going to frame this piece one day, okay? So this is an important aspect. So keep on sketching. Okay. Now, after we're done with such practice, we shall now go to the second topic, right? So the second most important topic when it comes to sketching is proportions. Or when it comes to car design is proportions, right? No one likes a disproportionate car, right? You can't have way too much gap between the two wheels. You can't have a car that's too wide, you can't have a car that's too short, you can't have a car that's too tall. So you want to ensure that your proportions are right. Okay, so what has happened over here is that my camera stopped recording and hence I ended up making a whole sketch without recording it. So I'm going to redo this, right? So when it comes to technical aspects of the car which we're going to need for proportioning, there are mainly two types of cars, okay? So there's the first, the normal type of car that we drive, front engined. Then there are the mid-engined cars, right? So the engine is located roughly above the back wheel, which is not exactly mid-engined, but it's somewhere in the middle, right? So that's why it's a mid-engine. So what this enables is equal weight distribution over the front wheel and the back wheel. Okay, so that's why these things are usually found as, supercars, sports cars, hypercars, and the rest. Okay, so now we're gonna make two different layouts to sketch these two cars. Okay, so while we're doing this, I'll keep on telling you about the proportions, so keep paying attention. We make the baseline first, usually. That will give us a good guide for us to where we want our wheel. Okay, and when you're making a car, it's very important to keep in mind that the distance between the front wheel and the back wheel is always ideally 3 wheels of the same diameters, right? So I'm just going to mark this out, 3 wheels. This is going to be your wheelbase, right? The distance between the front wheel and the back wheel. You go again, make another guideline. And the second one, is going to be a mid-engined layout. So I'm just going to mark it out, front engined and mid engined, right? So let's start with the front engine car first. I'm just going to mark out these wheels, right? And you want to make the centers of the wheels slightly inwards, right? So if it's this line, we're going to make it towards the inside of the car. This line, we're going to make it towards the inside of the car. Now this is because most of these cars have a sort of, a concave shape to the wheel, right? And that is something that really comes handy while designing. And for the spokes, you can just feel free to do whatever you do. So I'm just going to mark out 8, right? That will make it really easy for me. I'll mark out 8 of these and I'll just join them by these sort of very thin ellipses or ovals. I'm going to do the same over here. Mark out the place where I want the spokes to be. You can obviously elaborately design these, but I'm just going to go for a rough figure right now. Okay. That's a 3-wheel gap. And another important thing you have to keep in mind is the sort of car you're designing, right? So if you're designing a normal sedan, you want your car's height to be roughly around another 1-wheel height. So a 2-wheel height, right? So it will be roughly around here. This will give it a good proportion. Now when you're designing a supercar, right? For example, you're designing a Lamborghini, you want your wheel to be roughly around, you want your height, your roof line to be roughly around this height, right? Obviously for aerodynamics and all of the other technical stuff that we have no knowledge about. Okay, so we'll start off with this. Let's just make a sort of a guide roof line. Okay, so because this is a sedan, the roof line is going to be majorly flat from this point to this point right here. Okay, and the main difference between a front engine cars, I should mark out the engines over here, right, and a mid-engine car, which will have its engine right about here, is where the passenger or the driver sits. So in a front engine car, this space is roughly around here, right? And in a mid-engine car or in a front engine car, this space is right about here, right? So you want your driver or your passenger or whoever is sitting in the car to be sitting in this little space right here. This again will be your boot, and this will be your engine space. This will be your trunk or frunk as they call it. This will be your engine space, right? So this is called the engine bay area. This is your wheelbase done. The overhang is a space from the wheel to the end of the car, right? So this is the overhang. This is the overhang for the front, right? So this is going to make it long, because most normal cars have quite a long overhang as compared to supercars. So supercars will have overhangs right about here, right? Just that much, because they have to be short, they have to be compact, they have to be light, right? So the lesser the material, the lighter they are, right? Now you're just going to design a sort of shoulder line, right? We're going to make a shoulder line. So this will denote where the arches of the car will start from the top, okay? And now designing car to car. So I'm just going to make, let's say, a Rolls Royce, right? So I have my guides. I'm just going to make the shape of the lights, right, at the back. And you want to guide yourself along the roof line. So in a front engine car, your A pillar, that is the partition between the windscreen and your windows, will start right around here, okay? So a little further back from this wheel, the front wheel, and continue them, be a little straight, then you can slightly slope them downwards and completely finish them right around here at the back wheel, right? So don't make it exact, feel free to do whatever you want to. Then this is going to be a roof line, okay? This is going to be a roof line, which you can either drop it right here would be a bit more accurate, or you can make a sort of sport back design and drop it right here. So it's your choice, your creativity. Now what you want to do is ensure that you make good space. So this is the B pillar right here, the good space for the two doors, right? So I have quite a good space over here, right? This is gonna make my reference line for where the handle of the door will be. Okay, I might have made the roof line a bit too high in this reference, but it should be around here, right? And you just continue this line as a reference. This is the B pillar, sort of piece of plastic or metal that separates the front and the back windows, right? And this right here, so this one is the C pillar, okay? So this is the last pillar of the whole car's body, right? So this separates the window from the back window right here, okay? So these are the basics of proportioning these parts, and usually in most cars we always have a gap of 1:2, a ratio of 1:2 from the roof of the car to the bottom of the window, the bottom of the window to the base of the car. This ratio is approximately 1:2. Alright, so that gives good proportion to your car. Doesn't make your windows look too big or too small, they look just about perfect. And then that's about the basic shape of the car. After this, it's all yours. So you want to make lights, you make lights. You want to make different sort of grills, right, for the car. You want to make the little ecstasy, spirit of ecstasy, and just keep on adding details, right, until we're satisfied with the sort of design that we've made. Okay, so these are some basic proportioning tips that we're going to keep in mind. We're also going to be discussing another method to draw this sort of a car, so that will involve drawing ovals, which is why I said the practice of various different types of lines during sketching is very important. Now we're going to focus on the front engine car's layout, right? So on the mid-engine car's layout, we're going to focus now on the mid-engine car's layout. So this is your engine right here, approximately a block, right, about this big maybe. These are your wheels with a 3-wheel gap, right? Now the difference between any luxury sedan and a supercar is this, the overhang and the roofline height, okay? So the overhang is going to be slightly smaller when it comes to such supercars. This again make our wheels. When it comes to supercars, we want to make a shorter overhang. Alright, so just make it this much and this much, and you want to make the roof line, okay? So you want to keep it close to the wheel, because at the front of a mid-engine car there is nothing, right? There's only empty space for you to store a few shopping bags, maybe. It's not even much either, right? So you want to make a roof line, keep it close to the front wheel, and you want to take your roof line like this sort of a pattern. This simply because you need good space for the engine over here. So ensure that your engine has good space, right? All the components of the engines, the axles, the transmission that will go from here to the car. You want this to have good space. That's why we keep the back higher as compared to, any normal car where the back starts to end over here, right? You wouldn't be able to fit an engine in this gap. Okay? And you just sort of, dip it. Right? You dip it, or you dip it like this, or you can dip it like this. You can dip it in any way, right? So it depends on how high you want the back of your supercar to be. Usually, we always tend to keep the bonnet of the car or the front of the car lower than the back of the car, right? That looks much better. You don't want a car that looks a bit like this. That looks way too symmetrical. So we dip it over here, or we dip it in any height related to this. And we can make our own lights, right? So I'm just going to design these sort of lights. So you'll be able to see the cars on all of these lights simply because the front of the car usually has a bit of a curve, right? So if you just observe your own car from the side, you can see the lights slightly, right? Obviously not completely, but you can see them, right? You see the shape from the side. I'm just gonna, make this sort of Lamborghini-like design right over here. And over here, what you want to do is the A pillar. That is, this pillar in this car will start from right here in the supercar. Simply because you need space for the occupant to sit, right? You're not going to make a car in which nobody can sit. So your A pillar starts from here, and most supercars don't really have B pillars, right? They have it directly to the C pillar. So this goes from here to approximately over here, right? Again, keep in mind proportions. So a 1:2 ratio right here. So you can see this is a proper 1:2 ratio. Draw the baseline of the car again for reference, because some of it may get smudged out while you're sketching, right? And again, you come to the front and you dip it. So clearly a much shorter overhang, right? Shorter height, slightly shorter wheelbase, okay? Although, the wheels, it should be a 3-wheel gap. I have made it slightly shorter because supercars that are too long they don't look good simply because of the fact that they're too short, right? And again, made the roof line, made this height perfect, and it's in your hands, right? After this, it's completely in your hands. So why am I saying it's in your hands is simply because most people find getting to this part very hard, because we end up drawing cars with wrong proportion, and then what's there to sketch in a car with wrong proportions, right? So we can now just go crazy, right? We can make our own details. I'm going to make something similar to the Lamborghini Sian over here at the front, right? Drop it, you can make a diffuser sort of thing in the front. Again, you make this sort of a back. Also, another thing is that most supercars have quite an upward tilted backside, right? That is because of the low ground clearance, right? So if you want to be able to go over ramps, you will obviously need to have a slightly lifted end on both sides. The front cannot be lifted because of aerodynamics, but the back can be lifted, right? So that creates a sort of vacuum over here that keeps your car on the ground when you're going very fast. Yep, that's it. Basic proportioning right here. Okay, so naturally we're just gonna add some mirrors. Sensible cars. We don't wanna make anybody angry for not having mirrors, right? So again, this is a very Lamborghini-like look. You want to make your doors. So I'm just going to say this Lamborghini has a vent over here like this. This vent is to cool the engine, right? So the air goes into here, cools it, and comes out the back, maybe through some grill over here or some outlets over here, right? This is sort of sport back sort of design. And you just make your doors in pattern, right? So drop my doors over here. This is a very rough sketch, right? As you can see, it's definitely not something that you would directly want to color into, right? So you make your sketches like this, and this is all practice. Practice. So this was actually quite a slow process that I just showed you. I usually complete one whole design within a span of 2 or 3 minutes, right? Because I'm not explaining when I am. Okay, so this is one method, right? You make a baseline, you make the wheels, and then after that you make the roof line. After making the roof line, you define some shoulder lines that you want to make, right? So this point to this point, I should have made a line. right? I can specify however I want it, and then I can keep on adding details, right? So I keeping in mind that the engine is a little box over here, I basically pass the whole body of the car far away from the engine, right? So I don't hit it or I don't block it, right? Just add a little exhaust over here, but I don't think we're going to need exhaust because we're all heading into an electric future, right? So this is the basic proportions for a side view and one method. Now the second method is actually my favorite method that I was able to learn on the internet. So like I said, you're gonna have to learn how to make smooth ovals for this one, or ovals or ellipses, whatever helps you understand better. So to start this, we're gonna make one ellipse right here, okay? And this is sketching a car in perspective. Until now we were making side views. Now we're gonna sketch in perspective, right? So when you're making such an oval or an ellipse, right, you want your hand to be smooth. This should be light because this is not going to be defined in your sketch. Like look over here, these wheels that I've made, they're light, they're not defined in the sketch. The roof line is not defined in the sketch. The shoulder line is not defined in the sketch, although it is clearly visible, it's not defined. Similarly over here, you just make a very, very, very light oval, right? You pass another light line through it, and what you want to do now is make two of these sort of shapes, right? So just this one wheel and this second one, okay? So these are going to be your wheel arches, right, where your wheels sit, okay? So don't complete them. The human mind has a tendency to complete some things, right? So this is one of the things that will get completed. Now what you want to do is, after you're done with making these wheels, you can see that this is a sort of car that I'm sketching from the back or the front view. So let's say this is the back view. I'm just going to keep some respectable distance at whatever I think is right. I'm going to mark the back around here, because if I did around here, it'd be too narrow. If I did around here, it'd be too wide, right? So I'm going to mark it right about here, and I'm going to make a line, right? A reference line. So this is how wide my car is going to look from the back. And then, starting with this as a guideline, I make a sort of a front, so this is going to be our front wheel arch. And then starting from here, you make a sketch, make a line that follows this. Sorry, that was a bit too high. So you make a sort of curve that follows your oval and then dips down at the back, right? And you can just, make a sort of a light bar, right? And a lot of cars have light bars. The Porsche Taycan has a light bar at the back. The Fisker Ocean, I believe, has a light bar at the back. I may be right, I may not be right. Right? So this is going to be your back of the car. So this is a light bar. Okay. This is your center line of the car. This is about the center of your car, right? So if you're looking at your car from an angle, right? So you're not even looking at it from directly the side, you're not even looking at it from directly the front, the back. This is somewhat what your car shape will look like, right? So I'm just going to mark out these center points, and like I said, mark these away and just join them. Doesn't have to be perfect, you're only practicing, like I said, right? And then you just want to make your A pillar, dip it down right over here. But the reason why dipping it quite quickly over here is because most supercars have this, right? The wheel arch. This is usually quite wide in supercars. We're just going to make this sort of a guideline for our back window. Supercars do have back windows. Most of them might house the engine, but the fact is that they do have back windows. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to reverse your car if you had a supercar, right? And now that you've got this proportion right, you've got this perspective right, you can just feel free to do whatever you want. So I'm going to make another vent over here at the front of the car, right? So that'll sort of, make the car more aerodynamic. find my lights right now. Right. So when you're sketching in this way, you have to keep perspective in mind. So when you're looking from this side of the car, you can see this light completely, but you won't be able to see that light completely. Okay, so keep that in mind. Then maybe, let's be sensible. Let's have a number plate. So right below the light bar, and diffuser, right? Most supercars have diffuser to help them stay on the ground. I'm just gonna make any random sort of design. So maybe I'll put an exhaust over here. Again, not needed. We're heading into an electric future. But this is about what you can do with just an oval, right? Believe me, when I first tried this off the internet, I was blown away. I had no idea how to make supercars in perspective. You make your baseline right here. And once you're done, once you feel you're done, make a shadow, right? Now the shadow is obviously not necessary, but it's something that will add an element of, realism to your whole drawing. And you can just sort of make lines, right? You're using a pen or a pencil. I'm more comfortable with a pencil while doing this, right? You can even do this with pen, this whole thing. So this is the car in perspective, right? Can you see it? Yep, cool. Okay, so now we can now that we know this, we can keep on practicing. So let's make another oval. The more thinner you make these arches, the more of the back you'll be able to see, right? So this is quite a narrow view of the side that we've got. Mark out the center points of the wheels and make your spokes. So all of your spokes will not be visible. That's simply because it's sort of bent in, so you can't see the center completely from the side. So again, the same thing on the front wheel. So this is one of my favorite methods of sketching cars in perspective. I've learned this online. You can do this as well as you are currently. So fact is that most of us are having access to the internet all the time, so we should make good use of that, right? Now let's draw another car, but this time from the front, right? So this distance defines this distance. Okay, very important thing. This distance defines this distance. If this distance is more, this will be less. If this distance is less, this will be more. As you can see in this ratio, this will be a ratio of what? Approximately 3:1 or 1:3. This will be a ratio of maybe, I don't know, 5:1, right? 1:5 ratio. So you can see the more of the back of the car we can see, the longer this segment is, the shorter this is, right? If you were to completely make your car from the back, it would look something like this, right? This is your back of the car, the lights. This is a rough sketch, right? Just for a sort of understanding, right? And don't worry, right? If you're not able to make something that is looking similar to this, don't worry. It took me years to get to such levels, and obviously there's still room for improvement. As you can see, there's also room for improvement in the way in which I teach, because I'm just repeating some things over and over again, I think, right? So I hope the more mature of you won't get bored. This is approximately. So as you can see, we cannot see the side of the car at all, but we can see the back completely and symmetrically, right? So you want to make your back and your front, if you're drawing those, you want to make them symmetrical, right? Because that's what makes stuff attractive. Nature is a different story. Nature is not usually symmetrical, and yet it is attractive, right? So that's something that I won't dwell into because I'm no nature expert. So again, we make this line, we sketch these wheels, right? Now, notice that in these ones, I usually made the back wheel slightly higher than the front wheel, right? This one, I'm doing the opposite. I'm not doing that. I'm going to keep them equally aligned. That is simply because in most cars, the back wheel is slightly higher than the front wheel, right? So when you're seeing them in perspective, this should definitely look bigger if it's closer to you, because we know in perspective, what happens is that the closer something is, the bigger it is, the farther it is, the smaller it is, right? And then at one point, we almost can't see it, right? This is perspective. Now what happens when you're seeing the front wheel and the back wheel, this should be smaller, but because the back wheels on cars are usually slightly bigger, I'm going to make them the same size, right? So even if this is slightly further ahead, it will look approximately the same in size, right? You can again observe. So observing is one of the most important things, right? When you want to design something, when you want to become a designer. If you don't observe, then you won't be able to create new things. And one really amazing tip that many of my art teachers have given me is that carry a little notebook around with you, or maybe even in your own phone. In your own phone, every time you see something that inspires you to make something new, just note it down, right? That'll really help you out. You can design that. You never know. I mean, some things could give you new opportunities, huh? So this is going to mark out this front end of the car, right? Going to make a sort of curve, slightly curved line, and this will be our front. Okay, so this is going to make it like Lamborghini again. Like I said, I really do like Lamborghinis, and I'm pretty confident that I won't mess up the sketch of Lamborghinis, right? So I'm just going to make this center line. Okay, and again, same thing. Use this line of the ellipse or the oval for your guide. So because most supercars have the back dipping quite late, right? Supercars usually don't have such a backside. This is stuff you see on our normal cars. Supercars usually have a backside that looks a little like this, right? So much sportier, much more aerodynamic, and a spoiler or two wouldn't hurt, right? So again, I'm just gonna make the vents over here. Then this will be approximately the height of the hood, right? Then you just make your lights. Maybe add something similar to the Pininfarina Battista, right? Again, over here, perspective is quite important. So if you see something like this from this angle, there's quite a good chance you won't see the other light in the same view, right? So maybe log on to the internet and watch and observe some car pictures. You won't always see the lights in the same angle, right? This is your front windshield. I'm just going to bend it a little to the side, because front windshields usually they do bend a little to the side, right? Aerodynamics again, a lot to learn when it comes to cars. Then this is your badge. I'd say the Raging Bull for Lamborghini. Then make the front, another sort of diffuser sort of end, right? I haven't made much of a ground clearance for this car, but don't worry, we're not designing this car in real life, right? So no big deal. Then just make this window, right? And make this sort of a line, right? So and whenever you make this sort of line, right? So here, this line or this line or this line or these lines, right? They really do, they show how wide the wheel arches are, right? So your wheels in supercars are wider, definitely wider than our normal cars, right? So they also have to have a lower center of gravity. For those of you who don't get center of gravity, it's basically the lower you are, the more stable you are, right? So these are some basics. Again, I feel I'm done with the sketch. I forgot to make the mirrors. I'm not done with the sketch. Right? Forgot to make the mirrors, and just gonna sort of shade up the shadow, right? So I guess I'll let you practice now, right? I should let you practice this sketch, these sort of sketches, right? So again, I'll just recap again. Oval. Make a line that is not passing through the center, but is somewhere below the center, right? Make your wheel arches, approximately there. That you make your sort of, a wide body, right? Make the body of the car. These are called as wide bodies, right? Supercars with wider bodies look much more better than, our normal cars, right? And after that, you continue this line and allow it to be guided by your roof line, by the upper part of the ellipse. This should have shifted a little to the forward, but never mind. Ensure that you shift it to the forward, because I have no problem in imagining stuff, right? Because I've been sketching for a long time. So these are not sketches you're going to be hanging up on your wall, right? These are all practice sketches to make us understand proportions of a car. Now the sort of sketches that we are going to be, wanting to hang on our walls are stuff like, this and this, right? So these ones that, really look amazing. When they're done, that is, you cannot sketch those sort of illustrations without understanding proportions, right? So let's say if you were to sketch the same car, but you made it too wide or too narrow by mistake, right? That can really hamper your hard work into maybe rendering it. We're going to get to rendering in a few minutes, so don't worry. Let's just get over with this part, right? So oval, line, two wheels, right? And you make this little wide body, okay? Make the roof line and allow it to continue. When it meets, you mark this point and just stop it over here. Make a sort of light bar like design. It doesn't have to be a light bar, but just make this line to enhance that this is where this line, right, and this line from the bottom, they meet. This surface and this surface, then you just make the center point, mark it, right? And then after that, once you got the proportions right, you're free. So until now, what we have learned is the most important thing that we can learn if you want to sketch cars in perspective or in basically any way, right? Getting cars in perspective is the hardest thing. I could not get cars into perspective until I was, at least 15 or 16. I mean, I'm almost done with my 16th year now. But what I mean to say is that I was only able to perfect this art after I learned this method of ovals, right? So these quick sketches and all. So these examples that I showed you before, right? These are all made on the same basis. So here's your oval. Here's your oval. Here's your oval. Your oval. Right? So these are things that we have to understand, right? Otherwise, we won't be able to sketch a car that looks aesthetically like it's going to blow your mind, right? So that is proportioning and sketching done. Now creativity, right? So you can keep your pencils down, your pens down, or whatever you're using down, right? You can keep them down and just, hear me out for a bit. So in today's saturated market of designers and, cars everywhere, it's pretty hard to be original, right? You always get inspired. Like this looks like it came right out of, I don't know, maybe an old Acura or an NSX or something like that, right? This looks like it's a mix of the Pininfarina Battista and maybe a Lamborghini. This looks like the Mercedes AMG GT Vision one. I think I'm not sure of the name exactly. I'm afraid I'm a little behind on my days of reading all these automotive magazines. This is a slightly more original design, but again, it has the same sort of shape, right, that most of the cars in the market today have. So basically, if you want to be creative, you're just gonna have to open your eyes and observe the world, right? So you want to always keep a little notepad with you so you can keep on noting down ideas, right? The moment you get an idea, note it down. Okay, so that's very, very helpful. It allows you to again sit back and reflect on your ideas. Or else what happens usually is that you have a brilliant stroke, you have an amazing idea, and then when you're back home you forget it. You're like, oh no, what was my idea, right? So that's why keeping a little notepad with you is very important. Some yoga, some meditation, right? All of these will really help you keep calm, and they will really help you in blossoming out with your creativity. Okay, so you'll get so many ideas. And other than these, the only way to be creative is through practice, right? So what happens is that while you're sketching, you only get ideas when you're sketching, right? You won't simply just get ideas on your own. So when you're experimenting, let's say I want to put this sort of a light extension onto this. This is a new design that no one's ever thought of. I want to extend this light. This is something that no one's ever seen yet, right? Even if you just take old magazines, right, and you trace out the drawings in them using some maybe butter paper or something like that, it's not a bad habit. It is something that is good for your practice in making proportions, but please don't pass off all those drawings as your own if you've traced it. I'm not saying tracing is a good thing when you're lying to somebody about having not traced it, but tracing is something that is very good for your own practice, right? In my period from 2013 to 2014, when I was getting started with drawing only cars, right? So before that I used to draw a lot of things other than cars. I used to trace quite a lot. So keep an old magazine page over. If you don't have butter paper, because we're all in quarantine right now, so if you don't have butter paper, keep your magazine page over. Maybe take a sharp pencil and make a very deep impression, right, over the whole shape of the car. And if you lift your paper, then you'll be able to see that we have these sort of marks, right? So these will be our guides for your tracing, right? Won't they? So that is something about creativity. So we're now done with the sketching part and the proportioning part, right? I've also taught you how to sketch cars in perspective. And after proportioning, we have creativity, right? So like we just spoke about creativity, you have no other choice but to experiment, practice, and draw inspiration from various things. Now the next thing we're going to be looking at is rendering or illustration, right? So here are a few examples of illustrations. In an illustration, your car should be perfect, right? It should look realistic. And when you need something to look realistic, you can't have, these sort of messy borders, right? As you just seen in the photos I just showed you, right? So you need to have smooth lines. You need to have light lines, right? Don't put too much pressure, right? That will spoil your paper. And when you're coloring or painting, always ensure that the rest of the paper is clean and the car that you're drawing, which will, let's say, be over here, is the only thing that's getting painted. But ensure that your drawing is protected from your right hand or your left hand or whichever hand you're not using, if it has any marks on it. So for example, what usually happens while sketching is that you tend to rub your hand a lot over the paper while sketching, right? And so these sort of smudge marks may come along, which you want to avoid. Also, while avoiding this, you're also supposed to avoid this, right? So you don't want any blackening of your hand, right? So you want to keep the pressure on the paper light when you're rendering. Single strokes, right? So if you're drawing a wheel, one oval, that's all. Doesn't matter if it's wrong, you can always slowly correct it, right? Slowly correct it. And then you can rub away the lighter lines. So this line is lighter. Because we've made it light, it's very easy to rub away. And one of the main guides I take while illustrating is to make a line along the middle of the sheet, right? From both directions, both landscape and portrait. This is because I want to keep my car centered on the sheet, okay? So, and also on the screen or wherever I'm copying my sketch from, I ensure that I imagine these sort of lines running through so I can get my proportions right. You wouldn't really want a car that looks narrower than it should. You don't want a car that looks fatter than it should. You don't want a car that looks longer than it should. You don't want a car that looks shorter, higher, or maybe taller, etc. etc. Follow the drawing that you're making, right? So don't try and do your own things. If you want to make a perfect illustration, you're always going to have to follow the drawing that you're going to make. So speaking of creating illustrations and perfect renderings of pictures, I have here a wheel, right? I cannot illustrate a whole car because this takes me roughly around 8 to 9 hours to make, and since we don't have that sort of time, I'm just going to be making this little portion of the car, right? So this here is the wheel of a Koenigsegg Agera, which I am going to be replicating on this paper right here. Maybe not this paper, it has the marks of the tracing example I gave you. Right, so here it is. Oh, this too does. Yeah, this is the best. So like I said, what I'm going to do is I am going to be making a center line for my reference, because whatever I'm drawing, I want to keep it centered. Same here, I'm making a line in the portrait way. Hey, hi there guys. So from now on it's going to be mostly fast forwarded clips. I have taken quite a lot of your time, so don't worry, I'm going to keep on popping in and telling you what I'm doing. So right here I'm making quite a detailed sketch, and as you can see, I'm trying to avoid all second lines. So it's one stroke, and if I make any mistake, then it's always erasing. Thank God I'm making lighter lines. So as you can see, I'm currently filling in all of the black parts. All of the parts are going to be very dark, so do not need any color in them. This enables me to get a much clearer idea of all of those parts around the black parts, which will need to be shaded and merged into it. So what you can observe now is I'm filling up all of the lighter colors, and I'm ensuring that when I'm doing so, my hand is putting very less pressure onto the pencil and the paper. What this enables me is to put more and more layers of color on top of the lighter layer of color without damaging the paper. So this really helps because not all of us have access to really good thick paper, especially in times of quarantine. So I'm doing the same process over the whole sketch. So as you can see, in all the gray areas, I'm filling the lighter colors, and then the slightly more darker colors, then the more darker colors, until we reach the desired shade or the darkest color, right? So the next thing I'm going to be doing now is the tire, and in the tire I'm only using the black shade. However, I'm going to be maintaining a very light grip so I can go layer by layer to make the whole texture very smooth, and also to ensure that the paper remains strong. Okay, so now as you will have noticed, I have started putting the details into the drawing. So the carbon fiber pattern on the rims, the Michelin logos on the tires, and the golden hubcap in between. So I usually prefer to put the details at the end of each drawing. This is because if I put the details first, then they tend to get smudged by my hand rubbing over the drawing again and again. And yeah, I guess enjoy. Now the next thing that I'm doing is adding highlights. So I like to use a white colored pen for this. This is available in many stationery stores, so it's not hard to get. Now of course we're in quarantine, so that's a different story. After this I'm going to be adding the shadow, which will add a whole new character to the drawing. Have a look. So now that I'm done with the wheels, I'm going to do a little portion of the wheel arches so that you can have a better understanding. So the blue color and the gold flake color, it's going to be the same process. From the lighter to the darker we progress so that we don't harm the sheet. Alright guys, so as you can see, I've made an almost similar replica of this picture I found on the internet right here on paper. So of course it's not as color accurate or as detailed as it is in the picture, right? But that again depends upon the sort of color pencils you're using, the sort of paper you're using, and whether or not your hand is in an artistic mood, if that makes any sense. So here I've been using normal printing paper, which is much weaker than the cartridge paper I'm used to, so I guess I could excuse myself, but yeah, this is the best I can do on printing paper. And we have been using these Faber-Castell color pencils, the polychromos, right? Okay guys, so I think we can conclude this session on how to think and sketch like a designer and also illustrate realistic car drawings. I really hope you've understood all of these tips that I gave for this sort of drawing and also for these sort of sketches, right? So I hope you all will keep practicing, and do definitely check out my own channel. I'll put a link in the description, and if you're on any social media, then I'll also put links to those social media accounts over there for other such artistic stuff. Alright guys, so I think we can end this tutorial over here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy it. So I'll catch you in the next one.